I'm Louise Coyle. I'm the Director of Northern Ireland Rural Women's Network, which our remit is really to support rural women across our region. And why I think a civic initiative is so important is I don't think we hear enough of women's voices. We definitely don't hear enough rural voices in our decision making. And why not? I feel like we are a rural region. We're 40% rural in Northern Ireland, and that means a fifth of our rural population or a fifth of our population in total is rural women. And certainly, I don't see our decision making and our investment is coming a fifth to rural women. Under the rights and safeguards and equality of opportunity in the Good Friday Agreement, it says a new regional development strategy for Northern Ireland for consideration in due course by the Assembly is tackling the problems of a divided society, social cohesion in urban, rural and border areas, protecting and enhancing the environment, producing new approaches to transport issues, strengthening the physical infrastructure of our region, developing the advantages and resources of rural areas, and rejuvenating major urban centres. It also says a new economic development strategy for Northern Ireland for consideration in due course by our Assembly, which would provide for short and medium term economic planning linked as appropriate to the regional development strategy. And further to that, it says a commitment to north-south cooperation on urban and rural development. So it is my view that we are very far from having achieved any of those aspirations, as much as I agree with all of them. And I think our support for the agreement as a region showed that we all supported this. I think there has been a failure to deliver these things in any real way for all a variety of reasons, but we still definitely need to be tackling a divided society. Social cohesion, I think, in our rural areas and border areas has certainly suffered even more in the last couple of years with the outworkings of Brexit and the withdrawal agreement. It definitely has put pressure on our relationships, on our understanding of ourselves and our identity. And I think the only way to get around that understanding is through civic conversation, is to working together on the things that will make this a better place to live. So looking at things like the environment, we've seen recently all of the problems we've had with Lough Neagh, which services all of our whole region. It's the largest freshwater lake in Europe. It should be actually a tourist destination, and yet here we are trying to actually preserve it to be clean enough for drinking water and for people to live beside. And we can see the difficulties are caused by that lack of joined up working and joined up thinking between our different departments. And yet we are a small place. This shouldn't be beyond our capabilities to do that, in my opinion. I think we need to look at in rural areas we would find there is a thing called access poverty, or access to services, support and transport, childcare, education, training for adults particularly, and all of those things are that much further away. And now with the cost of living and the cost of fuel, it really is very difficult for people to access service support, particularly when lots of it is going digital. So people are not really skilled up in being able to access digital support always in rural areas, particularly those who have joined last, I suppose, to our digital infrastructure. And that comes down to the lack of that regional investment, that lack of an economic development strategy that looks at our region as a whole, sees where the investment gaps are and really tries to address that. You know, we hear a lot about the investment opportunities that are coming our way, and we're like, are they? Where are they coming to? Are we all still going to have to travel to Belfast for these great jobs that are coming? And I think we have to understand that the solution for access poverty in rural areas doesn't look like it needs to necessarily in urban. A really good example of that is, well, firstly, we're the only region in our islands that doesn't have a childcare strategy, which is frankly a disgrace, particularly if you're trying to look at economic infrastructure. So what would the solutions in childcare be for someone in a rural area? It's not going to be building a big creche, for example. So we need to actually not just look at the problem, but also what would the solutions be for you in your area. Some rural areas are actually quite well serviced for childcare, believe it or not, but some really have none at all. So that's what I mean about that. Who has taken a helicopter view of those economics and those very practical situations that we have? So we look at the situation that we're dealing with in terms of cost of living, and what I would call is an income crisis. It's not a cost of living crisis that's been created by the cost of what it costs to live. It's actually the lack of income to support that. So whether that is through paid employment or whether that's through our social support, it's not enough. That's what we know, it's not enough. So how do we address that? But also, how does that look and present itself in rural areas, and where is the support and the investment coming for people in rural areas in order to address those challenges? I would say that women, economically, socially and politically, have really not had the peace agreement dividend that we were expecting. Women are still living in a very patriarchal society here in Northern Ireland. I don't think our voice is being heard on things. I think Brexit was a very clear indicator of that. There's been quite a bit of research done, particularly at GB level, on whose voices were heard in the media. Those were not women's voices. Those were not the concerns of women. And I think that's why a civic initiative is so vital. Who are we talking to? Who is being listened to? Who is getting to have their say on our health service, which is clearly in crisis? Again, we're the only jurisdiction across these islands with no women's health strategy, and I quote our Department for Health, no plans to have a women's health strategy. Our education system used to be lauded by our politicians all the time. They're relatively quiet about it these days because we are slipping. And what's being done about that? What is being done about that, and what are the solutions, and is anyone asking us what the solution might be for us? What is it that we want to see? And I think the civic initiative is a really great initiative to get involved in, because you are being asked. We do want to know what you have to say about these. We want to know, what is it like for you where you live? If it's not good enough, what is it you'd like to see? If it is good but you'd like something better, what would that better look like? Let's be aspirational. And I think we've been really missing that joy and aspiration that we had at our Good Friday Agreement, where we were all out cheering in the streets and excited about what our future presented us. I think we have to get excited again, and we have to think about, let's not think about what is the minimum we could have, but rather, what is our vision for what we want for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our communities, and for the people around us. And let's be part of making that happen, because what I have learned is, sitting for 25 years waiting for someone else to make it happen, it's not going to happen. It's going to be down to us to actually try and make it happen together, collectively.